send those out after the, no, if we have time, we will answer those after the meeting, and then we'll send those out later. Also, there was one other thing. Okay, I told you about that we were going to put the sign-in sheet in the chat, and we will email out. So I think I'm going to turn it over to Judy Williams and Julie Whitworth, and we will get started.
Okay, well, I am going to share my screen with the presentation, and then I think, like Ms. Thompson said, we'll send that out afterwards. We've put some helpful links into the PowerPoint as well, so that's why we wanted to send it out afterwards. So let me go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to go to that. So, like I said, hopefully everybody can see the presentation. And tonight our first topic is navigating my students' ARD meeting. We did come up with these topics from the survey that we sent out earlier this year. And this was definitely one of the, most, marked on, that people wanted to hear about. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, and Judy Williams is going to do the first few slides. So here we go. Whoops, it's not letting me change my slides now. Oh, there it goes. Okay.
There it is. Okay. Well, I just want to say welcome to all of you. I'm glad you're all here, and that we can, talk about this ARD process and answer any questions you might have. This first slide, we wanted to put this one on here just to show that this process is a team approach, because school and parents work together as a team to build a good program for your student. And so we wanted to emphasize that this is the success of teamwork. We also added this chart just as a visual to show the parents kind of the flow of the process from evaluation to goals. When we do an evaluation, we gather information from formal testing and informal testing, such as parent report, teacher report, grades, observations, data collection, any interventions your child has had. The present levels of performance, which we'll go into a little more detail a little later on in the presentation. That's also known as a PLAF, and we'll talk about that definition later. But it's information that's gathered from the evaluation, the teacher report, the students' levels, and then we develop goals from that, which drives what services the student will receive. Did it go to the next slide, Julie?
Sorry, I don't know why. I don't know. Sorry, technical difficulties. It's not advancing. Sorry. Okay, there it goes.
There it goes. Okay. This next slide discusses the ARD meeting, and that's a interesting word, ARD, but it stands for admission, review, and dismissal. So those initials have a purpose and a meaning. And the ARD meeting is a specific meeting where the teachers and other staff, they bring their expertise on education, and parents bring their expertise on the student's needs, abilities, and desires, and what your expectations are for your child. And then together we develop an individualized education program. In MISD, the teachers and other service providers will send home the PLAF and proposed goals prior to the ARD meeting to give you an opportunity to review any information that we'll be proposing at the meeting, so that you can have meaningful input when you get to that ARD meeting. And the PLAF stands for Present Levels of Academic Achievement and Functional Performance. That is one of those words that I've heard it said many different ways. I've heard it say plop, I've heard plath, I've heard, there's a lot of different variations of that word, but it really is a PLAF. And the PLAF is the data that teachers and service providers gather to tell the story of where the student is functioning. academically as well as functionally. So there's two different things that we look at. We look at the students' academics and the functional piece of how they're performing in the classroom and things that they're doing. The PLAF covers all areas of where the student may need support. And this information that teachers gather for the PLAF is based on their baseline data, any observations of your student, and things that, areas of need in the classroom, their state assessments, any classroom data or district assessments. There's lots of other, information that is gathered for the PLAF, but it really is, I guess you could call it like the cornerstone that we build a student's program on. When we're developing a PLAF, we look at how your student is performing academically as well as functionally. And that AA, the academic achievement part, focuses on what specific kinds of academic information and skills your child has mastered, such as reading at a certain grade level or performing certain math calculations. So, the academic skills in the classroom. But we also look at that F, which is functional. The functional performance, and that refers to other areas of academic or of achievement that are not academic. So the functional part of PLAF can include information about your child's social skills, their communication skills, behavior, or any other activities of daily living. And then we, based on this cornerstone of information, we, see what areas your child needs assistance with, and we develop goals that we send home prior to the meeting, like I talked about a minute ago, and we propose those at the ARD meeting. Next. Before the ARD meeting, you will have a chance to ask any questions that you have at the ARD meeting. Many parents find that preparing in advance for the ARD helps them to feel more confident and have a better discussion about their students' needs. And we've added this slide to just kind of give you an idea of ways that you can prepare for an ARD meeting. You would want to write down anything that you've noticed about your students' academics and functionality. You can get copies of any evaluation reports completed before the meeting. MISD, we do provide evaluation reports prior to the ARD meeting. Sometimes we send those home as a paper copy if that's what you prefer, or through a document share, through email. And so we can provide any of those reports to you. We do provide those reports to you. You can write down any of your concerns, any new behaviors that you've had with your student. We collect any new medical documents of these behaviors. And doing this work beforehand can help help the ARD committee draft your student's IEP goals, and it can help you from having surprises when the committee is making decisions in the ARD. So at the ARD meeting, we do have an agenda that we follow, and this kind of helps keep us on track of the different areas that we need to discuss. I like to think of it as an outline of all of the areas, just to make sure we are covering all of the points. And so this agenda follows a specific flow which guides the ARD committee through all of the areas that need to be discussed to determine the best program for your student to be successful and make progress in their educational environment. We start with introduction. So we're just going to kind of go through the ARD agenda, the different parts of the ARD agenda, and things that you'll see at your students' ARD meeting. We always have introductions. We start with introducing everyone that will be attending the ARD meeting, and then we've listed out the people who could be in the meeting. Do you want to go through the next slide? There you go.
Sorry, got it.
And then the purpose for ARD meetings, there's several different reasons we could have an ARD meeting. These are some of the most common reasons we might have an ARD. The first one we have listed is an admission ARD. This is for a student who has never received any special education service, and an evaluation has been completed. And so that chart that we looked at earlier where the evaluation is completed and we go through the different steps. So after the evaluation is completed, then we would have an admission ARD if your child meets the criteria for special education. The other type of ARD we have is an annual review meeting. And this meeting is held once per calendar year. And we review the progress and develop or adopt a new IEP from the PLAF and the goals and all of the data that we've gathered. And that happens once a year. And then we could have a revision meeting, which is a meeting that's held between ARDs to propose changes to a current meeting. So if you've had an admission or an annual review, we might do a revision ARD if there's any changes that occur. You know, we don't ever make any decisions without the parents' involvement. And the D part of the ARD is called the dismissal ARD. This is when the student has mastered all of their goals and no longer needs specially designed instruction. So when students are in a special education program, we're looking at what instruction they need that is specifically and specially designed for that student. And, you know, our goal is always to move those students back into their general education classroom. You know, we're hoping to get them to the level where they need to be, so that sometimes we do a dismissal. And then we also have manifestation determination review, or you might hear MDR, which is a meeting to determine if the student behavior is a manifestation of their disability. Julie, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Just on that MDR, that would only be if a student's behavior is, you know, it's falling under like disciplinary action. So it's just like, you know, if a student is being sent to alternative school or something like that. So hopefully we don't have to have many of those. Okay.
Okay. And so the next slide we have is called evaluation. And we, if your child has had any new evaluation, we always review that as part of the agenda. We review the evaluation. And FIE, you may hear that term, stands for full and individual evaluation. There are a lot of acronyms in special education, and the ones that you hear the most are the ones we're reviewing tonight. So FIE is when your child has had an evaluation, and we'll review that. New evaluation should be reviewed prior to the ARD meeting. So you might get a call from, if your child has been tested for speech therapy, the speech therapist will call to review that evaluation prior to the ARD. The diagnostician, if they've had any evaluation for a learning disability or any other one of our 13 disabilities, you should get a call to review that evaluation. We also at the ARD determine, the FIE is the determination of a disability. So when we have the evaluation, we're looking to see if your child, your student has any one of the 13 areas of disability. And that's established during the evaluation, but the ARD meeting determines whether the student meets eligibility criteria. So you have to have a disability plus an educational need for specially designed instruction. And like I mentioned a minute ago, there are 13 areas of disability that may be considered for eligibility in special education.
Judy, I'm sorry. One thing I saw, a parent raised their hand, and so
I can't see that. Sorry.
I know. I just saw, but I know that there's been some people join. I think we're saying just put your question in the chat for now, and then at the end we'll try to go back and answer all the questions. So, okay, sorry.
All right, and here we just have the 13 disabilities that this is the list that we look for when we're conducting an evaluation. Because, you know, the district serves all disabilities in a continuum of services. So we've listed those out here. You know, some of those might look familiar. And then the next thing that we discuss at an ARD meeting is transition. And this, you know, transition really helps students start thinking about their path after high school. And so, you know, we look at transition prior to your child or your student turning 14 or younger if it's determined appropriate by the ARD committee. Transition services must be addressed. The transition services it's a set of activities that will help move the student from school to post-school activities. Starting in 7th grade, a formal transition plan is developed with the student on campus, and transition planning begins the process of post-secondary planning. Did you have anything else you wanted to say about transition?
No, you know what, I did think about just that, for everyone, it starts by, their 14th birthday, but some children, that maybe have some more significant delays or disabilities, we do share information for some of the waiting lists and things that start after high school. Some of those waiting lists can be 15 years long. So sometimes it seems early when we start talking about post-secondary planning, but we know that those waiting lists, can be really long. So after, if there's transition discussed on the agenda, the next thing is teacher and parent reports. Each person involved directly with the student's education will get to present a report. We always hear from the general education teachers. There's always at least one in attendance. Sometimes in elementary school, if there's a team, the whole team will participate. But in secondary, usually there's one general education teacher, and then we get written reports from the other teachers. Any of the special education teachers or providers also give a report, and then the parents are asked for any, information, concerns, comments during the ARD meeting. We usually have the teachers and service providers go first so that the parent can kind of hear all the progress data, any concerns, so that they can kind of, when it's parent turn, then they're ready to, reply or ask any specific questions they have after those reports. So like Judy said, from that PLAF, the teachers and providers do develop goals, which, the goals are those areas of need that they prioritize and, try to find those most important goals that are going to help the students, make the most progress. All the teachers and providers should be sending those PLAFs and proposed goals home for you to review before the ARD meeting, because we definitely want parent input on those goals. And then those goals are not approved until the ARD meeting and the whole committee approves those goals. Next on the agenda, we talk about related services and school health services. Not all students have a related service. This is just where it would fall if, in the agenda, if your student does. Things under related services could be occupational therapy, physical therapy, special education counseling. Transportation also falls under related service. These services are based on evaluations. And it is, of course, in the school setting, we're looking at an educational model, not a medical model. A lot of these therapies can be done through the medical model outside of school, but within the school setting, the educational model is looking at, do they have to have this related service to benefit from their special education service, is what we're looking at there. And then transportation, there are some specific guidelines for transportation that have to do with, if a child has mobility issues or communication. We always look at general education transportation first, but if there are some of those specific areas of need, we can look at special education transportation. And then school health services, if your student receives medication or any health service on a daily basis, we do document that in the ARD. And we usually, try to invite the school nurse, and then the school nurse or the designee, and we document that in the ARD. And then we also, for more medically fragile children, we do have private nurses, and we also address those services in the ARD meeting, what the private nurse is responsible for, and then what the school nurse is responsible for. All right, next we come to accommodations, and we review those in the ARD meeting. At that initial ARD, we'll be putting in what accommodations are necessary for success. It's hard with accommodations that we don't just, say, oh, well, that would be helpful, or, oh, that would be good. We have to really say, is it necessary for success? We do document that in the ARD meeting, and they should be implemented, on a daily basis, not just as needed. And after the ARD meeting, once everybody has agreed, we do, diagnosticians and speech therapists send the accommodations out to all the general education teachers so that they do have a copy of that. On the next slide, we talk a little bit about what accommodation is versus a modification. And then assistive technology, we address that in all ARD meetings. And that's something, it can be low tech to high tech. Things like, low tech would be maybe just a multiplication chart. High tech might be more like a voice output device. It's some type of, product that the child needs, to be able to access the curriculum. A lot of our kids right now are using text to speech or word prediction software on their devices. Those have been our district purchased those for everyone. And so those have been really helpful, to our kids that are having some reading difficulties or writing. Those have been really great tools. And so on this slide, it's a little bit blurry. Sorry about that. It just kind of talks about the difference between an accommodation and a modification. Sometimes I think people use those words to mean the same, and they're a little bit different in the education setting. An accommodation doesn't really change the expectation or the content, whereas a modification can change that actual, the level or the content of the material. An accommodation is more about just being able to help the child access the learning, and the modification is going to make it more meaningful and more productive for the student. For an accommodation, grading and credit is the same as other students, whereas if a subject is actually modified, the grading and the credit is going to be on a little bit of a different scale.
Julie, can I add to that just some examples?
Please.
Like an accommodation is like maybe a copy of class notes, sitting closer to the teacher or something like that. A lot of times accommodation A is just good teaching practice, but it's not, it doesn't cost you anything. It's just something, that's easy. Like I said, a copy of class notes, or, sending the quiz home earlier, the review sheet. But a modification, you're changing the content. So that's the big difference. The grading and the credit is different, like she says, but just wanted you to know on a modification, the content is changed, but on an accommodation, it's not.
Okay, thanks. All right, so next on the agenda, we, starting in second grade, we start talking about state assessment and testing accommodations, because the STAR test, right now starts for everybody in third grade. So we start making those decisions usually in second grade. Pretty much all the STAR testing is gonna be online starting this year. Now the ARD committee can determine the child needs a paper pencil test, but typically it's going to pretty much be online. And then when we talk about testing accommodations, they have to be routinely and effectively used in the classroom, not just on assessments. And so that routinely and effectively wording comes from TEA. There's specific rules for how, which accommodations you can use for different tests, for different children. And so the thing is, they don't want kids using these accommodations just for testing. They need to be using them on that regular basis so that they know how to use them, for one, and that they are beneficial then for the state assessment. So after that, on the agenda, we come to placement. And of course, placement recommendations are based on that PLAF and then the goals. And then the ARD committee should determine where can those be implemented, successfully for that student in the least restrictive environment. Those goals should really drive that placement decision. Goals should be in place for any service your student receives. That way they can monitor the progress. We do have a full continuum of services, and that's linked in here. From children receiving their services in the general education classroom all the way to more self-contained placements. Let me see what happens if I click on that. Oh, there it is. Okay. So like I said, this is linked in, but the very least restrictive environment, of course, is general education, and then all the way down to, homebound services. So can y'all see that? Anybody that's got their volume on?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to make sure, since I clicked off the power.
No, I can't see it.
You can?
No, I can't.
Oh, you can't. Oh, I'm so sorry. All right, let me stop that then. Okay, let me try it like this. So now.
Yeah, that's a little bigger.
Yeah. Okay, good. Sorry about that. I know Zoom is great, but sometimes technology isn't as great for me. But anyway, like I said, this is linked into the PowerPoint too, or the slide deck, just kind of showing, what the least restrictive is all the way down. Most restrictive would be, of course, homebound services. So let me stop. I'm going to go back to the slideshow now. Sorry about that. Okay, so that's all part of the placement. We do, ever since COVID started, we do talk about an emergency contingency plan in every student's ARD meeting, so that if we ever would have to go into a shutdown again, we kind of already have a plan in place. Whereas, we never expected 2 years ago that we would have to have those, but now we do. So after placement, we talk about extended school year services. We always consider those for every child in special education. There are some very specific criteria for extended school year. It has to do with regression. If students over a break show regression of a critical skill that they're not able to get back within a reasonable amount of time, teachers and parents can document that, and that's a reason to consider extended school year. Now, over the summer, every student shows some type of regression, but they're usually able to get those skills back pretty quickly once school starts back. But it's those children that have trouble getting those skills back that we really look at that extended school year for. And then, but we, like I said, we get teacher and parent input on that. And then the administrator, I'm sure if y'all have been in an ARD meeting, you have heard those assurances that the administrator reads at every ARD meeting. Y'all could probably say them from memory too. And then finishing up, in the ARD meeting, the diagnostician or speech therapist will ask you if you'd like electronic or paper copies, and we have to document that too. The diagnostician or SLP will read over the minutes from the meeting, and then get committee signatures. The parent and the campus administrator will be sent a document to actually sign that there are, we're in attendance and in agreement. The other members of the committee are just, considered in attendance. And so that kind of wraps up the agenda from the ARD meeting. So then we added a couple more slides just on, what to bring, which I know a lot of the ARDs right now we are doing over Zoom. And, just so parents know, y'all can ask for an in-person ARD meeting, but I know it's become very convenient for a lot of, parents to do them over Zoom, which is great. But of course, parents are going to bring their personal knowledge of the student. Of course, y'all are the experts on your child. And so we definitely, we know the teachers and the providers have that educational professional knowledge, but, the parent, of course, is the expert. Paper and pencil for jotting down, comments or ideas you hear or want to share with the committee. If you have obtained any outside testing or medical reports, the school always so appreciates when parents share those with the school. They're a lot of times very helpful to the school in decision making too. And then, just any instructional or behavioral accommodations or things that you have seen working at home for your child. I know a lot of times the teachers tell the parents what we see helping at school, but we also want to see what works for y'all at home too, so that we can incorporate that as well. So you've had your ARD meeting and it's been a couple months and you start seeing some things change with your students, some areas of need maybe that weren't there at the annual ARD, but now you're seeing some areas of need. You can always request an ARD meeting. Sometimes you can also even just, do a parent-teacher conference first. And then if it really seems like something needs to change with their actual programming, definitely request an ARD meeting. And prior to that meeting, just help with communication, explain what you're seeing so that, the people in your ARD meeting know what to help talk about. Reach out to your child's case manager, and just keep that, that conversation focused on need, not necessarily, sometimes we'll have a parent maybe call and say, I want my child moved to resource, instead of let's talk about what we're seeing the need of, and then do we need new goals? Do we need to adjust accommodations? Do we need to adjust placement? But let's talk about, what's that new need we're seeing that we need to try to address. And so, if you have questions or concerns during or after the ARD meeting, definitely know that those meetings are a collaborative meeting. Your parents are a big of part of that meeting as anybody at the school. During the ARD meeting, if there's something you disagree with or have a question about, definitely, express your concern during the meeting, explain what you're concerned about, and then hopefully work with the ARD committee to collaborate and come up with a way to revise that proposal. Now, if, I know there's a lot of things discussed during ARD meetings. So, you could definitely, after the ARD meeting, think about something and think, I'm not sure if I do agree with that. You could definitely schedule a parent-teacher conference. You could contact the campus diagnostician or speech therapist, and then also the, campus administrator to, talk about what your concerns are. And if there is something you're actually disagreeing with, we can always come back to ARD to rediscuss, revise, review, anything we need to do for sure. So like we said, we're going to be sharing this PowerPoint. There are some additional resources that we linked in. The legal framework is a state framework that it's kind of the legal part of special education. But, if you wanted to look up any of the legal terms or timelines, anything like that, that is great. A great resource is the legal framework. TEA, of course, Texas Education Association. That's where, a lot of the guidelines that we follow. Procedural safeguards, y'all are probably familiar with those. You get a copy at least once a year. Parents ARD guide, you should have gotten that at that initial ARD meeting, or really actually when the evaluation process started. And then this individual education program is just a parent website that has lots of different resources on different things for special education. And so we wanted to include our contacts. So that's all in the PowerPoint presentation as well that will be shared. All of our emails are in there. And so that's the end of the presentation. So we definitely finished with time probably for questions, if there's any. Like I said, I knew somebody raised their hand.
Mr. President, I think Mr. Preston, do you have a question?
Yes, ma'am. I just had a couple of questions. Just going back, just from the PowerPoint. I mentioned I saw with the MDR, and I was just trying to see how consistent of I guess you could say, of a bad behavior would be constituted before other action needs to be taken. Like if it's a weekly thing, or is it what's the trend, if you will?
Well, the MDR out of placement, when we talk about that, it's a change of placement. And so it would be if a student has been out of, we have a schedule of services page. So if they are out of that schedule of service for 10 days, more than 10 days, then that means it constitutes a change of placement. So we have to look at, when you're looking at behaviors, it may be that they were chewing gum and they got in trouble and went to the office, but they didn't get put in ISS. They weren't put or suspended or anything like that. It's more serious that, so in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, or alternative school, those are changes in placement that would constitute us looking at an MDR. Just going to the office and then going back to the class or getting your ticket pulled, that doesn't change your placement. So therefore, that's not what we're talking about. It's more severe behavior. Does that help?
Yes, because I was kind of confused of because I've had a couple of instances with one of my kids where the teacher had to phone me and I had to but that was all it took, was after the phone call.
Oh, no. We're talking about, say they were suspended for 3 days. They went to alternative. You can have a change of placement up to 10 days. But after that, we have to have an MDR to look to see, what's going on here. Do we see a pattern of behaviors? Do we need to change the goals, or maybe we need to add some goals or something like that? So you're a long ways from that.
Another question I had regarding modifications. Regarding that, could it be requested? Because honestly, I'm just curious to know, how will we know if our children are just going on the basic accommodations versus are they on a modified plan?
Okay, so when you are in the ARD, you're going to have the accommodations page and that'll be marked. So you'll see those accommodations. The IEP means something is modified. Like you'll look, the curriculum would be modified. And so therefore, it might be where they're on 3rd grade level, but their instruction is on 2nd grade level. So that is modified because they're not on grade level. And that would be done within that goal. So your ARD, at the ARD committee, they will talk to you about the modification of that information or of that curriculum.
So, but where I would find where my kids are would be in the IEP section of.
Yes, sir. And that PLAF is really, really important. And I'm really going to say, I think our special ed teachers do a great job of the PLAF, because we have designed it where you can look and it can say everybody else in the class is doing this, but Melissa is doing this. So you're able to see then how far off your student is from where everybody else is. And that kind of gives you a good understanding. Okay, this is what we need to do to get to here.
Okay, Melissa, can I add one thing to that? I know,
Absolutely.
typically if children have this service of inclusion where they're getting most of their services in the general education classroom, it's probably more accommodations and, getting them right up with their students. If a student is in resource or another more restrictive placement, their curriculum is probably modified. I don't know if that helps any.
Yeah, because I believe mine are more of a restrictive, because they're, like I said, there's multiple grades in the classroom. It's some that's in lower and higher grades. So I'm assuming that's more of a restrictive classroom. It's not with all kids in his own class or own grade, rather. Yeah, but how would, like I said, if I wanted to request to give him like a shot at that to see how he does, would that be more or less teacher's recommendation versus mine? Because I know his academics as well, but I'm a little bit more concerned about his comprehension. It seems like he does the work and he can do it, but he doesn't receive the direction always up to par. And that's what my biggest concern is for him, receiving. Like if you ask him something, he probably won't really understand it. And I'm like, maybe he had like maybe an aid with them possibly. Could that, possibly be an idea to try to see how he fares? And if it doesn't work, then put him back.
Yeah, I would definitely, I feel like our campuses and our art committees are very receptive, to parent suggestions, things like that. So I would, I would talk to your child's teacher first.
Yeah.
And kind of see, and we even can do like a temporary placement into a less restrictive environment. And then, we try that for 3 weeks and then we come to ARD and say, how'd that go? It went good or it didn't, So yeah, we can definitely, consider less restrictive placements for sure.
We have a question in the chat. Is there a list of what accommodations are available to request for specific learning disabilities? For example, if a student has dyslexia, is there a list for parents to be able to look at so they don't have to search and ask? I know many times we recommend certain accommodations, but that was the question.
And we could add some accommodations that we frequently use because, there are some that are pretty common. So we can absolutely add that because we're going to do the FAQ. So we really don't have any questions, but because we're being able to answer them, but we can put something out for you and attach it when we send out the link to this presentation.
Virtual arts have made things a lot easier, but one of the things that kind of went by the wayside is we usually had those lists of accommodations when we're in the face-to-face art. So that is one of the drawbacks of not having face-to-face. Great question.
Anybody else? Well, you have our email addresses. So if you think of anything, don't hesitate. You are in I think a pretty special ed friendly district. Your special ed case managers and principals are more than willing to help. So if you have any questions, if you want to talk to them or you can get with us, I just can't tell you how happy we are that we have this many people on this evening. And, I'm happy that we have internet and it's not blown down because the wind is absolutely out of control out there. But anyway, if there are no other questions, we will respect your time